Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world in a video that is slightly out of the usual sequence. Why? Because we actually have some news. It's been more than 2 months with nothing since late February, but we now have news of releases coming our way, and it is the turn of the Wood Elves. So I think this is a really good opportunity to remind ourselves what we've got forthcoming and what's going to be coming out according to the news on Warhammer Community. Let's start with the Arcane Journal. It's the usual 48-page supplement with 2 special characters. One of them is a returning character, which we've had on and off for absolutely donkey's years of the Warhammer history, which is Orion, King of the Woods. And we've also got Aerrolith, the Lord of Talzin. Don't think this is a character we've necessarily seen before by my recollection. The 2 armies of infamy are going to line into these characters, so we're going to have the Wild Hunt and the Host of Talzin available for you Wood Elf players. There'll also obviously be the usual additions of new magic items, and there's going to be something called the Law of the Wilds. Let's turn our attention to the Battalion box set. This is going to contain 62 miniatures. 32 are going to be Glade Guard equipped with bows and full command. They can also, it's noted, be used to represent Deep Wood Scouts. Continuing with the infantry theme, there are going to be 20 figures which can either be used as Wildwood Rangers or Eternal Guard. That can be 1 unit of 20 or 2 units of 10, both with full command. Given the way Warhammer is, I can't imagine anyone wanting to just take a unit of 10, or pretty much anything unless it's a skirmisher. Certainly when it comes to the infantry. And finally we have 10 cavalry models. They could be Wild Riders, they could be Sisters of the Thorn, or they could be split as 2 units of 5 each with full command. Does seem quite infantry heavy. We'll have to see how it goes, but it's not something that, again, initial feeling is I'm not sure how useful this is. However, not being a Wood Elf player, I could be entirely wrong with this. If I am, do let me know in the comments down below. Is this Battalion box set actually worth considering? We've also got coming out the usual cards and dice. I know some people are really keen on these, particularly the cards. The spell decks can be quite handy. However, I think it's really easy to make your own ones of these. And I do find Warhammer official dice really overcosted. There's so many people selling dice out there. Unless you're a real die-hard fan and you really want these to complete the look of your army, I don't really think it's something that I'll be picking up, even if, let's face it, even if I was a Wood Elf player, I wouldn't be picking up the dice and the cards. It's just too easy to do it myself or to buy something from somewhere else much, much cheaper. Because let's face it, a dice is a dice. Or rather, a die is a die. Let's look at some models. And first up, we've got a special character. It is Orion. Now, this model it's really nice with the 2 hunting dogs. I can see that definitely being a really nice centerpiece of someone's army. Whether or not the rules make it worthwhile to bring the character, and let's face it, special characters, they're not normally something you'd go to. They're normally brilliant picks from a competitive standpoint. But centerpiece model, I have to say this model looks absolutely incredible. Next, we've got Aerrolith of Talzin, which is also apparently known as the Grove of Eternity. The antler headdress on this model is just wild, but I think it does fit in reasonably well with your classic sort of look for the Wood Elves. The noble on a dragon. Now, interestingly, this is noted as being a High Elf noble on a dragon on Warhammer Community. Now, green dragons way back in the day were a thing that Wood Elves used to have the option of taking the forest dragons of Aerrolith. So it's interesting why they're labelling this as a High Elf thing. I do wonder if this is actually possibly a mistake and it's really just a Wood Elf hero or lord, most likely with the title of noble, riding atop the magnificent beast that is a dragon. This particular dragon is going to be a metal model, and again we're looking here real classic imagery, but I think this is going to be a bit of a nightmare to build. It's not going to be something for inexperienced modelers, I don't think. There'll be a lot of heavy parts which are also on fairly narrow bits, particularly looking at those wings, so I suspect a lot of pinning is going to be in people's futures. But of course you can't get away from the fact that dragons are absolutely killer in Warhammer the Old World, and anyone who can get hold of one is definitely strongly advised to at least give it plenty of thought. For some other returning metals, we've got some Wood Elf Nobles on foot, some Wood Elf Mages on foot, and a Branch Wraith, plus some mounted characters. So a Wood Elf Noble on Elven Steed and Great Stag, Noble on Great Eagle, and Wood Elf Mage on Warhawk. I think the stuff on Eagle and Warhawks are probably going to be a more popular purchase. That mobility is always super important, particularly I think with wizards, getting them into the right place at the right time. Looking at some returning plastics, we've got unit of Glade Guard, which as mentioned for the Battalion box set can also represent Deepwood Scouts. We've got a kit which would be Wildwood Rangers / Eternal Guard. For the cavalry, there's also a box of 12 Glade Riders and also a unit of a box set of a unit for 10 Wild Riders or 10 Sisters of the Thorn. Turning to the metal models which are coming back for the rank and file, we have the War Dancers and the Way Watchers. Finally, we should mention the Warhawk Riders which are coming out, the Treeman and Treekin Wood Elf Beast Pack, etc. Which adds a nice bit of colour if nothing else. I'd be interested to see how we start to see these models starting to use on the tabletop, and actually if this gives the Wood Elves a little bit more visibility and a little bit more active use. Having just talked about Wood Elves quite so much, I should pick up on the fact there's also some High Elves coming down the train. So we've got the High Elf Lawmaster, a combination of wizard and warrior. Finally, we're seeing the Silverhelms come out. I'm sure lots of people are really glad about that because, well, cavalry is king, and this gives you your core option for your knights if you're a High Elf player. And finally, we've got 2 arcane frogs. Models to use with the spell, or rather the scroll, of transmogrification. I just don't see the point, I'm afraid, with these ones. Yes, they're markers. Yes, they're a little bit different. Does anyone actually use the scroll of transmogrification, though? If they do, fair play to them, but I don't think I've ever seen it used, so I really don't think these frogs are going to be a particularly useful purchase. But there we have it, some news, things actually coming out for Warhammer the Old World, and it takes us that one step closer to everything being released and seeing really the forces of Cathay taking the field, that's going to be super exciting before we even get to what the future may or may not hold for the game of Warhammer the Old World. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Quick run through of the news that we're getting finally about these releases. Once again, thank you very much for listening. I am Return to the Old World. Have a great day.